To prepare for feedback session, you must first determine the purpose of the session. The purpose can differ depending on the fidelity of the prototype. For example, if you have a low fidelity prototype, you might be interested in understanding whether the purpose of product is clear to the user and whether the main functionality offered by your product can be easily identified. For medium fidelity prototype, you might be interested in finding out whether the interface is guiding the user to the right actions and whether the navigation is user-friendly. For the high fidelity prototype, you might be interested in finding out whether your choice of colors are making the user experience more compelling and whether the images are delightful to the user. Secondly, you have to decide what are you going to ask the user to do. Depending on your purpose, you might ask the user to complete certain tasks, or you might just ask some very pointed questions about the interface. And finally, you will conduct the actual test, which consists of putting the interface in front of the user and then giving them some tasks to do while you watch and learn and ask questions. There are 3 roles your design team needs to fill during the prototyping session. The first role is that of a computer. The computer is the person who is responsible for making the prototype come alive. This person moves pieces around, writes down responses, and generally does everything that a real computer would do. In particular, the computer should not do anything that a real computer wouldn't. So think mechanically and respond mechanically. The second role is that of a facilitator. The facilitator is the human voice of the design team and the director of the feedback session. The facilitator explains the purpose and process of the feedback session, obtains users' informed consent, and presents the user study tasks one by one. While the user is working on a task, the facilitator tries to elicit verbal feedback from the user, particularly encouraging the user to think aloud by asking probing questions. The facilitator is responsible for keeping everybody disciplined and the user's feedback session on the right track. Everybody else in the room, aside from the user, is an observer. The most important rule about being an observer is to keep your mouth shut and watch. Don't offer help to the user, even if they are missing something obvious. Bite your tongue and sit on your hands and just watch. The observers are the primary note takers, since the computer and the facilitator are usually too busy with their duties. Learn more about paper prototype testing by watching the video posted next. After conducting the feedback sessions, you need to integrate the feedback into the design and then go through the rapid prototyping and testing phases again. By the end of the feedback session, you should have answers to the following questions. Do the users understand the conceptual model of the prototype? Does the prototype offer what it needs to? And are there any missing features? Can the users find their way around? And are all the information preconditions being met? Do the users understand the labels on the screens? And lastly, whether the screen contents are appropriate and sufficient. In addition to learning everything that we learned from the paper prototype, a computer prototype will also help us figure out answers to the following questions. Is the screen layout clear or complicated? Are the users able to find important elements? Are the graphic design choices pleasing to the user? Have you appropriately implemented the design principles? For example, are Nielsen's design principles appropriately implemented? Do the users notice and respond to the sudden changes on the interface?